Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. What's happened to live entertainers is also a big concern, I think, of mine and a lot of people, because while restaurants and retail have been hurt, live entertainment has been closed down completely. So I wanted to reach out to one of my favorite performers in Port Credit, Tom Barlow. He is a 4-time Juno-nominated performer. He's an incredible rock and roll player. He's a great singer, performs in a bunch of different establishments in Port Credit and elsewhere around the GTA. And he's actually played in my backyard once, which was an incredible experience for me. Tom, welcome to my show. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing? Good to be on.
Thank you. So tell me, what has happened to you and to other live entertainers with COVID-19?
Well, I think it's a really good question, and it's quite a broad question because much like the long-term care situation, when the pandemic hit, that laid bare all of the problems that were systemic to long-term care, that people were not, the residents were not getting enough personal attention, that the staff were being underpaid, that they had no benefits. There's all kinds of structural problems. And then when the pandemic hit, it blew those problems up and sort of put them in the public eye. The music business, obviously not in the same life and death correlation, but the music business had all kinds of systemic problems where there's the elimination of the middle class musician. You can no longer make money selling music. It's not possible. 1 million streams on Spotify, 1 million is $5,000. That's a massive hit. So 100,000 streams, you're talking about a few dollars. So the entire industry has been in dire straits for a long time. And the story has always been told, well, you can make it touring live now. You can still survive as a musician. You just got to do everything live. You got to sell t-shirts. You got to play live. You got to tour. And then that is gone, not diminished, not slightly put down, gone. So now the structural problems combined with the lack of being able to make $1 playing live has left musicians with absolutely nothing. And one of the concerns I have is I hear the premier, every day he's saying, look, the small businesses, my heart goes out to them. He says the restaurants, my heart goes out to them. We're below them on the chain, but there's no discussion from government, at least at the provincial and federal level. There's no discussion. There's no, hey, you know what? The musicians are really screwed now. My heart goes out to them. We have programs for them. What we get is, hey, you got the CERB, pat on the head. I hope that's enough. So I'm really glad you had me on to talk about this, because I think it's important for your audience to know that we are in a dire crisis.
What's the solution?
Well, the solutions, structural problems, I think, require structural solutions. I'm sure you've been following me because you're a person who's very up on business, that the airline industry is saying we are in dire straits. Our industry has suffered massive losses, and we are going to need a government investment. And they are now sort of laying the plans for that kind of government investment to save the day. I think we need that kind of government investment. I think we need to have relationships with the streaming services where a musician, if they have a hit, in other words, if they have a great song that's great enough to get thousands or hundreds of thousands of people to enjoy it, there needs to be a revenue model where they can make a living. Because right now there's the poverty class in music and there's the extreme wealth class. You either do not have any income or you're Drake. And better relationship with the streaming services, and really just treat the music business the way you treat the mining industry, the way you treat the oil industry, which is to say you're an integral part of the Canadian economic system. And we need protections there at a federal and provincial level to keep it viable. The federal government bought a pipeline. There's a problem, we will buy the pipeline. So why is it, we are not an insignificant, arts and culture is about 60 to 80 billion dollars. That's a big chunk of the economy, not compared to the audio industry, not compared to the oil industry, but it's not nothing. And I think one of the issues with working with artists is we are loners. We are individualists, and that's what makes us good at our job. And I think as a community, we need to get together and step up to the plate and have real dialogue with provincial and federal leaders about the value of what we do.
So I agree with you completely, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show. But let's talk about how we solve this problem, and maybe thinking about some comparable industries for a second. So the book industry, bookstores have been devastated and are out of business. Amazon has taken over that business, or Amazon Indigo, and maybe one or two others. Right. And the local bookstore just doesn't exist anymore. That said, the author still can make good money because right. He is selling, or she is selling, through either Amazon or if you buy it electronically, you're still paying a fair price right. For it to be read electronically or to be read to you through Audible or something sure. like that. Why does that work in the book industry and it doesn't work in the music industry? And I could say, why does it work in the film industry with Netflix and Amazon Prime or whatever else, where you're still getting good value for the films, and it doesn't work in the music industry?
Well, I think there were several failures that got us to this point. Just out of curiosity, I looked this up today because I know I'd be speaking with you. But a Spotify stream, so if you fell in love with one of my songs and you want to stream it on Spotify, I get 0.00437 cents when you listen to it. 0.00437. The guy who owns Spotify is a very rich man. But that's what we get. And I think what happened when Napster first came out, when music became free, there was not an uproar in the business. There was division among the record labels. There was division among the artists. A lot of the artists were saying, this is going to level the playing field. Let music be free. And we never got out from under that. I can't think of another industry. It used to be you would have to spend $18 on a CD. A couple of bucks a song. And that went to absolutely nothing overnight when we had Napster and other file sharing services. Now, Spotify comes along and says, we're going to give you something. It's better than nothing. And we went, well, it's something. We'll take it. Imagine what the oil business would do if tomorrow you go to the gas pump and instead of $1 a liter, it's 1/10 of a cent a liter. Yeah, well, there would be outrage.
A while, gas was negative, or oil was negative at least.
Right, but I'm saying the price at the pump.
Yeah.
Right. If you could fill up your car for 50 cents, the oil industry would not allow it. It would not allow it. But artists, fortunately and unfortunately, but mostly unfortunately in this case, artists we don't want to whine, we don't want to complain, we chose this life. No one says that to the CEO of the airline that says, we need a government bailout. No one says to the CEO of WestJet, you know what? You picked this. It didn't work out for you. Airlines should have been a hobby for you. You should get a real job in a sector that works. But people are very comfortable saying that to artists, which I think is another one of the structural problems that we're talking about.
So hockey players, basketball players, baseball players all created a union and solved the problem that you're identifying that way. The airline industry is an oligopoly. The film business is almost an oligopoly. Don't you guys need to get together in a union?
Absolutely. I think, once again, getting back to why we're having this conversation today, the pandemic has exposed how dire a situation it is, because our last revenue stream, through no fault of our own, is gone. And let's not just think about the artists, let's think about the indie record labels. Let's think about the sound guy. Let's think about the light guy. Let's think about the roadie. Let's think about the entire industry. Let's think about the PA company. Let's think about the guy who sells hot dogs in the lobby. It is a big industry that employs thousands of people. It is gone. And have you heard a politician talk about the effect on the music business of the pandemic? Not once, not even a mention. These are people who go to concerts. These are people who expect, when they try to find a song on YouTube or Spotify, they're going to get it. And these are big problems that we have to solve. But certainly, as you mentioned, getting together is one of them.
So, I've got a couple hundred CDs that I haven't opened in a couple of years. I've got tapes that I haven't opened in decades. And I've got albums that I actually open up every once in a while to play just because of the fun of it, vinyl. But technology has changed more in the music industry than almost any other industry in the world.
It certainly has. And the issue was the industry did not lead the technological advancement. The technological advancement came from the guys from Napster who just said, you know what? We can rip all of these songs and just put them online and we'll make it everyone able to get there. If the record industries had have in the 90s, and believe me, they were warned, had have said, look, this technology is coming. Let's think ahead. But they didn't think ahead. They thought CDs cost 80 cents to make and we sell them for 20 bucks. Our business is great. And no one wanted to look 5 years down the road. No one wanted to look a year down the road. And then when technology leads your industry, you are not in control of it. And that's what's happened.
Well, it's sort of like, and this is not fair, but just to think about it for a second, cameras and professional photographers. When everyone's got an iPhone and the iPhone's camera is so good, professional photographers and, Kodak, et cetera, are similarly challenged.
It's an interesting comparison because yes, everyone has a camera and everyone can put filters and everyone can take a decent photo now. There are still professional photographers who can make good money, but they're under a lot of stress. So the question I would say is, right now, it is very difficult. Like, I'm known as a person who mentors young artists. They come to me and say, Tom, I want to make it in the music business. Can you give me some advice? Can you maybe introduce me to some people? Can you do? And I have to look at, a 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old person and think to myself, you're going to get into a world where it's almost impossible for you to make even a terrible living. You will never have benefits. You will never have government support in a meaningful way. It will be an uphill battle your whole career. Even if you become a gold level artist, 50,000 records, what would be 50,000 records, you still won't make a living. And we are going to become an industry of hobbyists and the children of the wealthy. Because who else is going to be able to do it? It still costs many thousands of dollars to make an album, to have it mixed, to have it mastered, to do the artwork, to make the music video. The investment still needs to be there. And, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, these are middle-class people. And I just don't think that the middle class, the average person has access to the kind of money it would take to make it in the music business. If you've got rich parents, it's like, here's $100,000, go chase your dream. But who has that? Like I said, not John and Paul as teenagers. They didn't have that kind of dough. And the amateur photographer, sure, they can take some pictures, but do we want great photography? I think we do. And I think we want great music. And I think we want the next Beatles and we want the next Stones. And unfortunately, they're going to get jobs in tech or in something else because they can't afford to be musicians.
So what's the solution? We've got to, lots of people have talked about how COVID-19 has effectively given us 5 years worth of the advancement of a digital economy in 5 months. And I think that has happened in retail sales, in lots of different sectors of the economy where people are, talking to each other via Zoom, talking to each other first in FaceTime, not going to work as often, buying stuff not from their local store, but from Amazon and or big box retailers or online. And so this digitization, this digital economy that's impacted you and that industry so negatively has only accelerated as you've identified. But we can't go back in time. The intellectual property that musicians create hasn't been protected and hasn't been paid the fair value. But now that it has come down to such a low price, how can you ever get it back up again?
This is a difficult question because it requires a group of people who see themselves as individuals. And generally, if I could, make a broad generalization. Generally, musicians are independent people. It requires getting a bunch of independent people to say, we're not going to do this anymore. My song has more value than 0.00437 cents. I'm sorry, it does. And unfortunately, the major labels did deals with the Spotify's and the Apple Musics. And we don't have access to what that deal is. We just don't know. It doesn't trickle down to us. And I think what we have to do is we have to be louder, we have to be more aggressive, and we have to be more of a collective. And if we don't do those things, if we don't have a mechanism to make sure that the Prime Minister at least mentions us, I can't get over how many people are saying in this pandemic, music has been the thing for me. Music has lifted me up. Music has been there for me. Yes, everyone wants it. Everyone needs it. It feeds us. It feeds us spiritually, but it has no value, no absolute value in the world. So I really think it's on us. I've spoken with some labor leaders. I've spoken with some record company people, indie record company people, and I'm trying to put together a coalition that will at least get us considered as an industry with value, as an industry that should continue for the middle class and not just for the wealthy.
Well, it seems to me like it's got to be that combination of the record companies with Spotify and other streaming services that solve the problem. When I think about the book business or the film business, that's sort of what happened, is that, yes, there was abilities in technology to distribute the product, whether they be Audible or Amazon or Netflix or Amazon Prime, et cetera. But the companies realized that they needed to have enough money in the system such that they could pay the creative talent. And what you're saying is that we're at risk of not having another Beatles or Stones or Tom Barlow in the future.
There's no question. There's no question. And we've seen it a little bit in sports. There's a lot of people in hockey who are afraid that hockey has become so expensive. It's going to become a sport of the wealthy. And there's stories about Gordie Howe only played hockey because he was given hand-me-down skates. His family was way too poor to buy equipment. Many of the biggest hockey stars of all time came from nothing. They came from poor family. They came from working class families. It costs so much now, we're going to lose that. I believe that's already happening in the music business. And very frankly, I have producers who are successful producers who will say, this artist is not great, but they got rich parents. So I'm going to do the album for them. Because their reality is they got to get paid. They have a mortgage, they have a family, and they can say, this kid's really great. Even if he's successful, he's not going to make me any money. And this rich kid over here is a sure thing. That is what's happening today. And our music will decline. Right now it's only there because artists are like, I know it's crazy, but I have to do this because I feel the need to do it because I have to do that. And people who work in the oil business don't wake up and go, getting oil out of the ground is my passion in life and it fills me up. It's a job and it's an industry. And there might be passion for it for technical reasons, but this drive and this love we have of creating art has become our worst enemy. And but to me, it just feels like it's a level of exploitation and a certain blaseness in the audience, which is, you pick this, it's a hobby, why should we support it?
So maybe what you need to do is launch a artist's own Napster that costs more money, but pays the artists more, and try to convince artists that they only give their music to artists on Napster, not the current Napster.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because Taylor Swift, arguably the biggest pop star on the face of the earth, tried to do that. Tried to say, I'm not going to have my song on Spotify. I'm not going to do this until tried to cut a deal. Somebody with that clout, no one's got more clout than her. Basically, nobody in the pop industry anyway has got more clout than her. And she had a hard time. So imagine us getting, 20 or 30 indie labels that represent a few hundred bands and fighting against the Spotifys and the Apple Musics. I think we have to have big guns at the table to say, this is a monopoly. that is exploiting us. We work in a completely unregulated industry. There's no minimum wage. There's no safety protections. You know, when you go see a band at the Phoenix and there's 1,000 people there and you had a great time, know that the bass player in the band or the sound guy is about to get into a 1989 van that has no safe, that is not safe at all, and is going to drive for 14 hours. And nobody's going to say, you know what, you got to drive for 6 hours, then you need a 2-hour break. No protections. This is the world we live in that somehow we have accepted. And we need to get together, and we need to at least have basic income, basic protections that all other industries get.
So I had Hugh Siegel, former senator, former conservative political leader, on my show, and he was saying that the solution for this and for lots of problems in a whole bunch of other industries is a guaranteed annual income comparable to the CERB. And he was commenting about truck drivers. They're going to be, out of work because of autonomous vehicles, and, go through industry after industry after industry. Bank tellers that are going to be out because everyone's using ATMs. Grocery store clerks are going to be out of work because everyone's going to have self-serve checkouts. Is CERB the solution? Is a guaranteed annual income the potential solution?
I'm a fan of it for multiple reasons. I'm a fan of it because, homeless people cost a lot of money. They use a lot of social services. They're in emerge. They're in hospitals. They are in conflict with police. That costs money. That costs resources. You can eliminate a lot of that with a basic income. So I'm a fan of a basic income. My concern when it comes to the arts is it doesn't address the fact that we are not treated as an industry in the same way all other industries are treated. So yes, I'm a fan of the basic income. I think it solves a lot of problems. And I think even if you're on the economic, right wing of the spectrum, if you just look at the math, you say this makes sense. Social problems, social inequities cost a lot of money, and this would certainly help that. But I think we need structural change.
We've had a lot of attention on the restaurants, on retail, on the workers. But I think one of the challenges, and I don't think it's fair comparing this to you, but I'll do the comparison anyway. A very good chef deserves more than just the CERB, just like Tom Barlow deserves more than just the CERB. And so therefore, when you think about a guaranteed annual income that only pays people a certain amount and a low certain amount, maybe that's not the right way to do it, and that's not fair. But I think you're right that while we've had attention on restaurants and retail and workers and airline industries, we haven't had any attention on entertainers. And I think we need to, and particularly people that relied on live entertainment, and you're one of them. I've enjoyed listening to you so many times, and I miss it. I miss it a lot. But you're right. The whole system was ruined a couple years ago, decade ago, and we have to figure out how to fix it up.
Yeah, and to go back to your analogy with the chef, imagine if the food could be downloaded, and instead of a $40 meal, it's 0.003 cents that gets sent to the chef. Even though he's still got to buy the food, he's got to be trained to make the food. He has to serve the food. But no one's paying for the food. We as musicians keep making the food, and nothing's coming back. And as I was saying, eventually only rich people are going to make the food because it's a hobby.
Yeah, well, basic economic supply and demand would suggest that what's going to happen is as you've suggested, there's not going to be any more Beatles or any more
Stones, whoever. Beatles, Led Zeppelin, whoever, right? All working class bands.
And so the supply of good new music is going to go away, and so therefore we're all going to either be listening to bad new music or oldies.
And it's outrageous. The owner of Spotify said a couple of weeks ago, look, you can't put an album out every 2 years and expect to make a living anymore. You have to be putting out content constantly. Let's understand that Dark Side of the Moon. Let's understand that, your favorite album did not get written, recorded, produced, and put out in 3 days to create content, which is what we're told to create now, content. Those albums were deliberated over. They were masterpieces that have survived, and are still some of the biggest selling albums of all time because they're great, because they took time, because there was investment. And this guy, who's a mega millionaire, is now telling us how we create content for his stream. It's outrageous.
Well, Tom Barlow, thank you very much for talking to us about this challenge. I've done shows on restaurants, I've done shows on retail, and now I've done a show on live entertainment. I think we've got problems in lots of different sectors of our economy, and maybe yours is the worst.
Well, thanks for having me on and giving me a chance to say my piece. And believe me, I'm a supporter of the restaurant business. My heart goes out to them. We work in the restaurant business. As you know, I am in restaurants and clubs all the time. But I also understand that when they're up and running, when they get to open at half capacity, the band doesn't get to play because it doesn't make sense. The band comes last. When the bar is back, when they're making money again, when they're at full capacity, then they'll start spending money in entertainment. So the fact that no politicians are talking about us when we're at the end of that chain, I think is another problem that says people expect great music. They want great music. They love great music, but we're on nobody's radar. So thanks for at least getting us on the radar for this segment.
And I'll have you back when we figure out the solution.
Excellent.
Tom Barlow, 4-time Juno nominee, an incredible rock and roll performer, one of my favorite performers. And I got to tell you, I have to put my hands out to Shore, which is one of the establishments that you played in, because even though they were at reduced capacity, they opened up a big patio in the back and invited you and other performers to come out and play. And there's a couple of other places that have done the same thing. And what we all need to do is when we do have an opportunity to see live entertainment, we need to go, and we need to not complain about paying a cover or contributing to the performers, because if live entertainment is the only way they can make their money today until we figure out this system and solve it, then at least let's pay for the opportunity to dance together, to sing together, to listen to great music together, because it is the soundtrack of our life. It is that one thing that brings us together, I think, almost more than anything else, because we all love to hear great music. Tom Barlow.
Thanks very much for having me on. And Maureen is the best and the biggest supporter of live music I know in the city. So thanks to Shore and Maureen.
Tom Barlow on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Thanks so much. Good night, everybody.